Hi there, good day. Thanks for joining me in this fresh edition of the program, The Insight on Equinox Television. All you need to know about the French presidential elections, the second round that is already ongoing. We shall be having results in few hours right ahead. All you need to know about the two presidential candidates, their views on Africa and the role of Cameroonians in these French presidential elections. We shall equally be revisiting World Press Freedom Day that was commemorated in Cameroon. With my guest tonight, he is a senior journalist. He is an international journalist. My guest tonight, ladies and gentlemen, join him after this. You're watching The Insight on Equinox Television. Thanks for joining me. My guest tonight is Ellis Smith. Ellis Smith is a senior journalist. Ellis Smith, good day. Thanks for joining me.
It's a pleasure to be here, sir.
A pleasure being with you within the context of the French presidential elections that is ongoing as we speak, and the results will be known in just some few 2-3 hours. We'll know if it's going to be Marine Le Pen or Emmanuel Macron. But what is primordial today as far as France is concerned? Is it the economy, security, socio-political life? Remember that with neo-colonialism, what touches France equally touches Cameroon.
Exactly. I think that to respond to your question is what is the primordial? I think the primordial aspect in France today are two. You have the security problems and then the economic problems. You know, France has been in economic crisis for about 4 or 5 years today, but the recession in France is very old. I think it began in 1974. That when recession began in France. So I think to respond to your question is the economy, one, and then security. Those are the priorities for both candidates, whether Emmanuel Macron or Marine Le Pen. And as far as Africa, especially French-speaking Africa, not the entire Africa is concerned, French-speaking Africa, because they are too close culturally and economically. You have to understand that the legal tender in 16 French-speaking African countries south of the Sahara, that is the CFA, is backed by the French franc via the euro, which has also been of great help, even though it is kind of controversial. There are many people around French-speaking Africa who think that Cameroon or CFA should become independent from the support that it is having from the French treasury. That's not my take, because there are in those things some good aspects and some bad aspects on it.
So those two issues are going to be a daunting task for the next French president that will be replacing François Hollande. Now, when you look at the views of these two presidential candidates from the first round, when they cross the first round, what comes into your mind?
What comes into my mind first is that both of them are, in code, not established politicians. It is a victory, which is a global trend. You've seen what happened in Brexit, in the United Kingdom, whereby Nigel Farage, who was the leader of the UK Independent Party, campaigned tooth and nail for Britain to leave the European Union, which, to be sincere, I need to confess, I like the idea, because I think that the European Union is a hideout for dictatorship, which I don't like personally. That's my personal view. And Nigel Farage won. If you go into the United States, people thought, anyway, the intellectuals wanted Hillary Clinton to win, but the people of America wanted Donald Trump. And if you go to Philippines, you see Mr. Duterte won, even though he had a kind of vicious campaign against the church there in the Philippines. If you come into Hungary, you have Viktor Orban. If you go to Turkey, you might not like, his name, Recep Tayyip Erdogan, but Recep Tayyip Erdogan is winning because the majority of Turks want him. So in France, Macron or Le Pen are the fruits of a general global trend today, whereby people want to test something else because they are tired of traditional or professional politicians.
The wind of change, which is sweeping across the world, but very difficult to sweep across Africa, in the African continent. We saw just cases like the Gambia, where we've seen a new strongman coming in with the former Gambian President Yahya Jammeh, who is now seeking refuge in Equatorial Guinea. Back to the French presidential elections, when you look at Macron, Emmanuel Macron, somebody who went to the National School of Administration, his political life, he has nothing to write home about. Do you see him ascending into power in France, looking at his political life?
Yes. The reason is, as I said, and which might appear as though I'm a bit contradictory, is that on face value, when you look at Macron, you will think that he is a neutral person who comes out of the blue. He's not a professional politician. But if you put your lenses or you put your ears on the ground and look at it keenly, he is in the mold. He was former finance minister in France under Francois Hollande. And then he was also that's 9 years ago, his ambition to become president of France began when he was part of a team created by Nicolas Sarkozy, headed by Mr. Attali, to look for ways and means of making France to come out of perpetual deficit or try to relaunch France's economy. So that is where his ambition began. Now, can he be elected as the president of France? Well, if you look at what happened, the result during the first round, then I think he can be elected. Is he ready? I think he's ready to rule France, even though if you look at him also keenly, you will discover that he is a kind of unstable, not fixed. He doesn't have a clear-cut idea. He doesn't have a clear-cut program. He tries to behave like a chameleon, adapting his strategies, his speeches, according to the audiences or the people that he meets. Mm-hmm. So I think Macron, first of all, the only sympathy I seem to have for Macron is that in case he wins, it is going to be the victory of the youth over seniority. It is going to be the victory of a pro-European liberal against a wave of nationalist and populist politics that is sweeping across Western Europe. That is, if he wins.
Even though his policies are status quo, that's the same he made, is going to be the same because he's not against immigration. He's not against immigration like what Marine Le Pen thinks, that France should be like France first, just like Donald Trump who says America first. Macron has been a member of the Socialist Party even before resigning to create his own party. Don't you see that Macron is the handwork of the Socialist Party, Francois Hollande and others, which means that if Macron comes into power, though Francois Hollande will leave, the invisible hands of former top members, as far as France is concerned, will continue to rule France?
Yes and no. Yes, because he has been working, he has been a finance minister, and being a finance minister in a socialist domain.
Celebrated across the world, even in Cameroon, and the little region had the president of the Federation of African Union, who doubles as the president of the Nigerian Union of Journalists, Abdel Walid Odusili, who came visiting Littoral region. We have interviews of the week coming up.
Especially what happened in Cameroon is to me, is actually uncalled for. I come from a country where terrorism, Boko Haram, is a very big problem, and it's a big challenge to my colleagues in Nigeria. But there's no such law that will compel a journalist to disclose this information, even when you have any contact whatsoever with the so-called terrorists. What we know is that most of our colleagues have professional contacts with their informants. with their sources. And for goodness sake, nothing should compel a journalist to disclose the source of information. If the security agencies are actually working the way they should be working, then they should go out, they should have had such information. A journalist doesn't harbor any criminal information. All he needs is just the contact with probably his source. And I expect the security agents or agencies to also have the same contact. What will a reporter have other than just the phone contact of his sources? So if these agents, security agents are working very well, they should have that phone contacts themselves without recourse to the journalist. So any law that forces a journalist to disclose source of information is anti-freedom of the press, it's anti-freedom of expression, and should be condemned. And we condemn it totally anywhere it happens, including Cameroon. Well, it's not about South Sudan alone. We also have similar things in Somalia, where journalists are going through hell. You see, to perform their duties. Well, even in my country, Nigeria, we have seen things like that where journalists have suddenly become targets of attack and assassination. It's disturbing to us in Africa. Journalists, we are just messengers. We information messengers. We gather information and we transmit to the people. We are no threat to anybody. We are no security threat, and as such, we will not be treated as anything other than just people who are doing their legitimate duties. So when in the performance of our duties, our lives becomes are endangered, then we have to be concerned, and that's why as FAJ and as journalist leaders, we also tell our members, journalists, to be as professional as possible in all they do, such that even your enemies will know that you are just doing your job as a journalist. We don't take sides, we don't align with anybody. The only alignment we do is we align with the truth, we align with the facts. And once you are on the side of the truth, you follow the ethics of the profession, you can be rest assured that you will be safe.
Yeah, welcome back. Those were interviews of the week, interviews we had just for you in this edition of the program, The Inside on Equinox Television. My guest tonight, Ellis Smith, is a senior journalist, an international journalist. With him now, we will be talking about Press Freedom Day, commemorated in Cameroon, the 2017 edition, and even across Africa and the world. Now, Ellis Smith, when you've been a journalist, and even a TV director in Congo Brazzaville. When you look at journalism in Cameroon today, the practice of journalism, do you think that the press is free in the country?
Oh, yes and no. You know, we thought we have to be honest enough to say, I will talk about Cameroon and then on the sub-region, right? Well, if you look at if the numbers of newspapers, media houses, or TV or radio stations were any benchmark, then we'll say it is free. But the problem in the media in this country is that you are free, for example, to talk about the president, but there are some no-go areas. You cannot carry out investigative reporting on the oil and gas sector in this country because it's it's a cesspool of corruption where all these leaders who are running this country are there to have a parcel of the cakes. There are some areas where you cannot go. Now, if you look at the number of journalists recently arrested, like the star case is that of Ahmed Abba, framed up and presented as an ally of Boko Haram, which is a big joke. It shows that there is a problem about freedom of expression in this country. But now, if you were to compare it with Equatorial Guinea, where there is no one bit of freedom of speech in that country, but the paradox indeed is that this is a country where you cannot say anything, you cannot write anything against about Obiangema, but he sponsors a number of medias around the world or in Africa. Then if you look at the case of Congo Brazzaville, whereby you have another journalist whose name is Gis Fortuné Mbemba, who is in prison today, the publisher of Talassa, simply because he had an interview with Reverend Father Ntumi, who is being attacked in the Pool region. He is now in jail. So if you want to compare Cameroon to Congo, well, you will say there's freedom of speech in Cameroon. If you want to compare Cameroon to Equatorial Guinea, you can say there's freedom of speech in Cameroon. But the fact that today you have 11 or 10 journalists in detention, and besides Ahmed Abba, one thing that annoys me and that saddens me is that framework of Tilarius, who is the political editor of the Sun newspaper. He was really framed up, and then he's now in jail. It shows that there is something that has to be done about freedom of speech in this country, because freedom of speech is good even for this corrupt dictatorial regime. It's good for everybody, where people can express themselves openly. And then when you have people who also say that a media house like Afrique Media, they should remove them from cable lines or cable distributors, I think it was unwarranted, unjustifiable, unjustified, and then worthy of being condemned in strongest terms. So I think that's my assertion of the freedom of expression, of freedom of the press in this country.
But when you equally look at outings, the president of the National Communication Council on Equinox Radio said the report of Reporters Without Borders was subjective, which placed Cameroon 130 out of 180 as concerns press freedom.
Well, to be sincere, I share his idea, right? Because I would say there is something. Reporters Without Borders, they are very good at campaigning for the freedom of journalists. I have been a beneficiary, I know that very well. But their classification, there is a problem. I talked to you about Congo-Brazzaville. It's not as though if something is, I would just say Cameroon is blank or bad, red, red, red. If you look at here in Cameroon, we can speak here, but in Brazzaville you cannot. You cannot come on a TV station and talk about Sassou Nguesso. You cannot come on a TV station and talk about the massacre, the genocide taking place in the Pole region. Yet, Reporters Without Borders has the effrontery to say Brazzaville is better than Cameroon. No, I think the national president of Council of Communication,
National Communication Council,
I think there he was, Peter Isoka was right. You know, you need to, you know, in these things, if you want to criticize somebody, it's just like a hair. You might hate a hair, but you need to have the honesty and the courage to say it runs better than other animals. Then I think Peter Isoka might be pulling the veil toward him or toward Cameroon, but he was correct. But then I think Peter Isoka and the government of Cameroon needs to understand that arresting journalists, refusing some subjects, some themes, you don't have to talk about secession, you don't have to talk about federalism, you don't have to talk about so and so thing. I think that's where Peter Isoka, who is somebody I respect very much, but I understand that he has a sledgehammer over his head, dangling over his head, and he has to dance according to the tunes of his bosses. But then they need to work.
Which was not supposed to be the case.
Which was not supposed to be the case, because this is not a democracy, my dear brother. This is a kleptocracy, which is a kind of a notch upper than dictatorial regimes. It is a kleptocracy, and in kleptocracies, all institutions are under the mantle or the direction of one man, who is the president of the republic. So I think that's why the hands of Peter Isoka are tied. So on that assessment of the evaluation of the Reporters Without Borders, Peter Isoka was through and through correct. But that doesn't mean that Cameroon is better off. Cameroon has to do more. Arresting journalists willy-nilly as they are doing is unfair. Threatening to withdraw licenses to media houses is unwarranted. When you call owners of media houses and say, I don't want this person to come and participate in so and so program, it shows that you are not free. What are they afraid of? Allow people to express themselves, because when people express themselves openly, then you can know how to respond to them. But when they are doing what they are doing, the government of Cameroon, it simply means that they have something to hide. When you have Chiruma Bakari, the spokesman of the government of Cameroon, organizing a press conference to attack a single newspaper called Jeune Afrique, then there is a problem. We have to allow people to express themselves openly, and I think freedom of speech is a good thing, it's a prerequisite for a democracy. If there's no freedom of speech in a country, or if it is cherry-picked, as it is the case in Cameroon, then we are not yet a free country, we are not yet a democracy, a liberal democracy. When I was talking about liberal democracy, I didn't mean about ideology. I meant that a liberal democracy is a democracy whereby people are free to express themselves, there are protection of minorities, there is alternation of power, and there's freedom of speech. That is a liberal democracy. An electoral democracy in which we are is where we know that, well, let's go and organize an election as we are going to organize in 2018, and that Paul Biya once again is going to win. That is what you call electoral democracy, and then a liberal democracy. I want Cameroon to become a liberal democracy where journalists will not be arrested as it is the case currently.
Now, before we go, it is a running subject, the Anglophone crisis, what has been termed today the Anglophone crisis. Archbishop Samuel Kleda is now moving in some towns in the northwest and southwest regions. He was in Manfe, Kumba, Boya, Bamenda to meet with stakeholders in the education sector, especially the Catholic Church. When you look at the Anglophone crisis today, where it started and where it is now, what can you say? What would be your reaction as far as the role of the government and even the role of the church?
The role of the government has been sheer incompetence, primitive, mendacious. So they have done nothing. They have just been, this government, you have a set of ignorant and arrogant people governing them. So that's the reason why this thing became what it has become. But then I think the government of Cameroon underestimated the unity and the resolve of the Anglophones, because I would like to say it once again here. What happens in Victoria or in Manfe or in Fruawa is not what it has nothing to do with what happens in Yabasi, because people want to compare. Okay, there's no road. Yabasi is just 60 kilometers from Douala. There's no road in Yabasi. Well, Yabasi, for 1 month there was no light. People never complain. That is their problem. But Anglophone Cameroon was a country, for Christ's sake, and nobody can change that. As long as they don't want to accept it, there's always going to be a problem. And my other take is that my fear, I can now become a prophet of doom, but I will say it. Do you know why Ethiopia got disintegrated? Eritrea left Ethiopia simply because the fundamental law of Ethiopia was violated by Haile Selassie in 1963, and the Eritrean Liberation Front was created. And when the Tigray Liberation Front came to power after they overthrew Mengistu, led by Meles Zenawi, a referendum was organized, and the Eritrean Liberation Front opted for independence. In 1972, if my memory is not wrong, when Nimeri decided to do away with the autonomy of South Sudan and decided to send John Garang to quell the Anya rebellion, gave rise to the Sudan Liberation Army led by John Garang. And at the end, in 2011, South Sudan disintegrated. So my prediction for Cameroon, it is dire if the government of Cameroon continue to behave arrogantly, ignorantly, and are not humble enough. And I think we have 2 more decades to be here again as one nation. So the thing is very bad. You cannot continue to behave the way they are behaving that way. As for Monsignor Kleda, it's a pity that he's going to be humiliated, because his posture is different from what the Bamenda Ecclesiastic Province had published. That is the rule, and that is where the government of Cameroon needs to stick. Anything short of that is not going to work. I'm sorry to say it, I'm saying you my mind. I'm not a politician. I'm not come here like you have the bourgeoisie, comprador, collaborationists, Anglophones who are in Yaoundé, who lie perpetually about the reality. The reality is that the people in southern Cameroon are fed up with the whole system today in this country. And it is, honestly, I think the process is irreversible. It can be corrected if the rightful decisions are taken. For example, free Mr. Ayapor. What the hell has he done? Free people like Fontaine, free people like Agbobala. They haven't done anything. They have been arrested simply because They are defending a just cause. Allow people like Bob Gahamoni who are abroad to come back into their country. That is how you do. But unfortunately, we have a country with such a corrupt group of so-called elites who are not patriotic, who do not love this country. And that's the reason why I think the beginning of the end has just started.
Now, when you look at the role of the church, before we go, when you look at the role of the church in the Democratic Republic of Congo, very powerful. They have even recently, the Catholic bishops have called for the resumption of dialogue. When you look at Cameroon and the role of the church, do you think that politically bishops are equally playing politics under the table?
Yes. For example, thank you very much for bringing up the DRC. Yes, look at how the Episcopal Church, I don't know how they call it, the church in the DRC has done. And when you compare with the Church of Cameroon, the Catholic Church, it's at variance. If you look at the position of the Bamenda Ecclesiastic Province, it's different. If you look at the general posture that is
the National Episcopal Conference,
a National Episcopal Conference represented by Monsignor Samuel Kleda, it is a disgrace. It is a shame for him to come back today to tell people to go back to school when the enabling environments are not there. Then he is a disgrace. And I'm afraid, because let him borrow a leaf from the DRC Episcopal Conference, then humility warrants that let him come here on your set, that he can accept that he has failed. It shows that we are two different people. He doesn't live in southern Cameroon. He doesn't know what people down there are feeling. He is behaving as though he's been manipulated. I'm sorry about that. I used to have a great respect for him, but I feel that he has really disappointed. The church has a role. He needs to learn from Bishop Ndokmo. Bishop Ndokmo was a patriot, and he could not have acted the way he has acted. He has to learn from his eminence, Cardinal Tumi. And he is not learning. Well, maybe he's under pressure, but I think he's going to fail like all others. Schools have to resume, right? But the enabling environment needs to be put in place. Free those who have been arrested. And then you remove those your forces of insecurity who maim and rape, and they are not punished. But then people who are there to defend their rights are arrested and thrown into jail. It's unfair. So I think the church has a role to play. They have a moral authority to play. But what he is doing is that he is going to disgrace the church. He is going to divide the National Episcopal Conference of this country along linguistic grounds, which is unfair, which is uncalled for. And I think I don't know what happened to him. I don't know the type of terminological definition to describe what he has just done.
Okay, it was a pleasure having you in this day's edition of the program, Ellie Smith. Thanks for coming.
Yeah.
It was a pleasure having you.
Thank you very much. Whenever I am invited, I will always report for duty, and I always like to speak my mind. I'm not a politician. I like to say what I think. It might please some, or it might not, but I don't know. I got nothing to lose. What I got is just to speak the truth.
Just to know that you have been very keen as far as this Anglophone crisis is concerned since it began.
Yes, because, you know, for example, there are things I don't like. I don't like injustices, and the Anglophones have been marginalized in this country for too long. They have been considered like second-class citizens. And let me give you an example before we conclude. Whenever the Anglophones want something in this country, it is given, but after they have been massacred, humiliated. The GCE board, after they have killed a number of Anglophones, was created. As vicious and untrustworthy as this government is, when the GCE board was created, they never even gave the money. And go and look for Mr. Lawrence Thatcher and Andrew Wara, Azong Wara Andrew. They will tell you what happened, how untrustworthy these people are. They are vicious. They gave out the GCE board no money. It was Tasha Lawrence, the owner of Amity Bank, that has been destroyed and given to Atlantic Bank. You can ask him. I'm not inventing anything. Ask Azong Wara Andrew how it happened. Now we have achieved it. Now and again, we want some Anglophones want just the respect of the common law system, because in this union, through and through, the Anglophones have lost. The only thing that the Anglophones will not bargain or accept to trade it is the educational system and their legal system. That has to be made abundantly clear.
Thank you. We'd like to have you some other time again.
Thank you.
It was equally a pleasure being with you in tonight's edition of the program, The Insight on Equinox Television. If you did enjoy the program, book another rendezvous with us next week Sunday, same time, 6:30 p.m., same channel, Equinox Television. Good night.